For hundreds of years, the buried city of Pompeii has given archaeologists astonishing snapshots of life in ancient Rome, but it still holds some secrets. Beneath the wetlands of eastern England lies something that defies every rule. Archaeologists thought they knew about Bronze Age Britain, a complete settlement frozen in a single catastrophic moment 2,850 years ago. Wooden bowls still held the remains of their last meals, threads remained attached to ancient bobbins, and tools hung exactly where their owners had left them. This shouldn't be possible. To the untrained eye, the Fenland quarry pit near Peterborough looks like a mud bath, but to experts, it's archaeological nirvana. When the Cambridge Archaeological Unit uncovered what they would call Britain's Pompeii, they found a Bronze Age city which would challenge everything scholars believed about life 3,000 years ago. The preservation was so perfect, so complete, that veteran archaeologists stood in disbelief. Bronze Age sites don't look like this ever. Normally, excavations reveal shadows in the dirt where wooden posts once stood, and if conditions are favorable, perhaps some pottery fragments or maybe a pit of animal bones if luck smiles. But this site held 4 round houses with walls still intact, complete toolkits in every home, and a wooden spoon sitting in a bowl of half-eaten porridge. Every object seemed locked in motion, as if the residents had simply stepped outside for a moment and never returned. The £1.4 million excavation revealed a settlement built on stilts above a slow-moving river, with each roundhouse measuring roughly 538 square feet and featuring walls of woven branches plastered with clay. The entire community was surrounded by a defensive fence of sharpened wooden posts standing 6.5 foot tall, and everything about the design spoke of confidence, security, and a people who believed their world was permanent. But it wasn't. Sometime around 850 BC, flames tore through these tightly packed houses in minutes, forcing residents to flee with nothing. And then something extraordinary happened. As the structures collapsed into the water below, wet mud smothered the fire and sealed everything beneath, an oxygen-free environment that prevented decay for nearly 3 millennia. The same disaster that destroyed this city also gave modern science its greatest gift. Chris Wakefield stood in the excavation trench staring at timber that should have rotted away 2,850 years ago. The wood was charred, blackened by fire, but preserved perfectly, every axe mark looking fresh, grooves catching the light as if the carpenter had only just walked away. At first glance, it seemed impossible. Wakefield, part of the 55-person Cambridge Archaeological Unit team, had worked dozens of Bronze Age sites and knew what they were supposed to look like: fragments, shadows, guesswork. But this broke every rule. 4 round houses stood with their walls still intact, not reconstructed, not imagined, actually standing. The wattle and dog walls showed precise weaving patterns, posts bore axe marks indicating exactly where builders shaped them, and joints between structural elements demonstrated carpentry skills equal to any medieval craftsman. Inside one round house, a pottery bowl sat undisturbed with fingerprints of its maker still imprinted in the clay. The bowl contained the remains of wheat grain porridge mixed with animal fat, and a wooden spoon lay beside it. Someone had been eating breakfast when the fire started. They set down the spoon, fled the building, and never returned. This was the moment Wakefield realized they weren't excavating a typical Bronze Age site, they were witnessing something unprecedented in British archaeology. Most Bronze Age excavations offer 10 or 20 pieces from a 500-piece puzzle, forcing researchers to imagine the complete picture, but Mustam gave them 250 to 300 pieces. The level of detail was staggering. 40 bobbins lay where weavers left them with threads still attached, and 15 buckets scattered across the houses told their own stories. One had been flipped and used as a cutting board, its surface scarred from countless cuts, a small improvisation frozen in time. The team called it archaeological nirvana because that's exactly what it was. Every detail, from a bucket repurposed as a cutting board to a spoon left mid-meal, made the past feel disturbingly alive. This wasn't studying ancient history, this was standing inside it. Mas Farm wasn't carved into rock or anchored on firm ground, it was floating. Each home stood on posts driven deep into the riverbed, suspended 6.5 feet above the water. This required engineering knowledge that archaeologists had never credited to Bronze Age builders. The builders knew load distribution and the physics of shifting currents, how to select timber that would resist rot in constantly wet conditions, and how to calculate the spacing between support posts to avoid sagging or collapse. This wasn't trial and error, this was refined engineering knowledge passed down through generations and adapted for specific conditions. The round houses were marvels of architecture, their shape distributing the stress evenly around the supporting posts, shedding rainwater with exceptional ease, and gaining the most interior space while using the least amount of construction material. This design can outperform many modern square-shaped designs in various tests today. What was then considered a primitive hut by archaeologists is actually the result of highly sophisticated experimentation, structures shaped both by necessity and genius. Mark Knight, site director for the excavation, stressed the confidence these Bronze Age builders showed. They had a blueprint that worked beautifully in waterlogged landscapes. As the climate changed during the Bronze Age, expanding wetlands across Britain, these groups didn't abandon their productive territories. They rose above it, literally. The innovative solutions they developed enabled them to stay and thrive. The wattle and dog walls showed precise weaving patterns. Branches were woven tightly, then plastered with clay to create weatherproof surfaces. The roofs thatched with reeds angled perfectly to shed water. Every element demonstrated thoughtful planning. Inside each roundhouse, families created distinct activity zones comparable to rooms in modern homes. Kitchen areas occupied eastern sections to catch morning light. Storage and weaving areas filled southern portions where natural light remained strong throughout the day. Even their defenses were engineered with care. The sharpened post fence surrounding the settlement stood as a defensive ring meant to keep out whatever lurked beyond the water. A square entranceway structure controlled access while maintaining the defensive perimeter, balancing accessibility with security through careful design rather than improvised construction. Sometime around 850 BC, in the heat of late summer, disaster struck. Flames tore through the tightly packed settlement in minutes. The heat was so intense that timber posts charred within seconds. Thatched roofs dry from summer sun ignited like kindling. Residents had no time to grab possessions, no time to release the lambs trapped in their pens. The speed of destruction was terrifying. Within minutes, every structure was engulfed. The wooden spoon sat abandoned in its bowl of porridge, tools hung undisturbed on walls. The lambs died trapped in their pens, unable to escape. If the fire had started slowly, someone would have released the animals. The evidence shows residents fled in extreme haste with nothing packed and no valuables recovered. Then something extraordinary happened. As the burning structures collapsed into the water below, wet mud rushed in to smother the flames. The sudden collapse created an oxygen-free environment that prevented normal decay processes. What should have rotted away in months was instead sealed in a perfect time capsule. The same disaster that destroyed the settlement also preserved it. For nearly 3 millennia, the city waited beneath layers of peat and sediment. The wetland environment starved of oxygen prevented bacteria from decomposing the organic materials. Wood, textiles, food remains, everything that would normally disappear stayed intact, frozen in the moment of catastrophe. When 20th century quarrying finally exposed part of the site, archaeologists discovered something that would shock experts and rewrite history books. This wasn't just another Bronze Age excavation. This was Britain's answer to Pompeii, a complete community preserved in the moment of disaster. The comparison to Pompeii wasn't an exaggeration. The Roman city frozen by volcanic ash in 79 AD revealed unparalleled information about ancient life because it captured a single moment across an entire community. Mass Farm did the same for Bronze Age Britain. Families organized their homes, what they ate for breakfast, where they stored tools, what they were doing in their final moments before disaster struck. all revealed with unprecedented clarity. The irony was inescapable. The fire that devastated the inhabitants gave modern science its greatest gift. A perfect snapshot of Bronze Age life frozen mid-motion. Inside the round houses, every surface whispered stories of lives interrupted. The pottery bowl with fingerprints still imprinted in clay. The wooden spoon beside half-eaten porridge. These weren't artifacts displayed in a museum. These were the last moments of ordinary people caught in catastrophe. Archaeologists uncovered 128 ceramic vessels scattered throughout the settlement. Jars, bowls, cups, and cooking pots, many still stacked or nested as if waiting to be used. The craftsmanship was refined. Smooth walls, symmetrical rims, decorative patterns matching those found hundreds of miles away. These weren't crude containers. They were quality goods that required significant skill to produce. Bronze tools filled every household. Sickles for harvesting grain, axes for chopping wood, gouges for carving, handheld razors sharp enough to cut hair or cloth. These weren't heirlooms or luxury items reserved for elites. They were everyday tools for ordinary families. Each of the 4 roundnesses contained nearly identical toolkits, suggesting bronze was far more common than experts had imagined. The textile stunned researchers. Largely made from flax linen, the fabric was soft, nearly velvety despite having been submerged underwater for millennia. Seams were neat and even. Hems were carefully finished. Though individual garments couldn't be identified, the quality was undeniable. These weren't rough, primitive cloths. The perfectly preserved settlement contained textiles that required significant skill and time to produce. 40 bobbins lay where weavers left them, threads still attached. Wooden boxes and bowls carved from willow and maple still held their shape. 15 buckets scattered across the houses, each told their own story. One had been flipped and scarred from use as a cutting board, a small improvisation that made the Bronze Age feel suddenly familiar. Every groove in the timber, every tool on the wall, every bowl waiting to be filled blurred the line between past and present. Wakefield said it felt as if the residents had only just left the distance of 2,850 years collapsed. Time stopped making sense when you could see fingerprints pressed into clay by hands that had been dust for millennia. Chemical analysis of residues inside pottery vessels revealed something shocking. Traces of honey mixed with deer meat. These families weren't just boiling grain and hoping for the best. They were seasoning their food, combining flavors to create what researchers described as a prehistoric version of honey-glazed venison, a dish created nearly 2,800 years before modern recipes would rediscover the same combination. The bowl of half-eaten porridge told its own story. Wheat grain mixed with animal fat abandoned mid-meal when flames forced evacuation. Analysis of other food remains showed a diet rich in lamb, deer, and game. Waste piles beneath the houses revealed that the community kept dogs that fed on table scraps. Human coprolites contained evidence of intestinal worms, a common affliction in the Bronze Age. But the evidence of daily life extended far beyond food. The textiles woven from flax linen demonstrated remarkable skill. The fabric's soft velvety texture survived underwater for millennia. Seams were neat and even. Hems were carefully finished. The quality required significant time and expertise to achieve. These weren't people wearing rough animal skins. They dressed in carefully crafted clothing that would look respectable in many historical periods. Not everything served practical purposes. 49 glass beads decorated the site, some imported from as far as Denmark and Iran. Amber beads added golden accents. These luxury goods appeared in all 4 roundhouses, distributed evenly rather than concentrated in one elite dwelling. The availability of imported items suggested they circulated more widely than experts had imagined. Then there was the skull. A human skull, rendered smooth from centuries of handling, sat among household items. This wasn't a burial.